The letter arrived at Willow Thornton's boarding house room in Boston on a Tuesday morning in March 1874, and by Friday she was standing on the railway platform with a worn leather bag and burns covering half her face. She touched the scars absently as the train whistle screamed, a habit she had developed over the past 3 years, since the factory fire that had stolen her beauty and her prospects. The advertisement had been simple enough. Rancher in Nebraska seeking wife, no requirements beyond willingness to work hard and build a life together. Most men wanted a photograph first, but Quinton Barnes had written back after her honest letter explaining her circumstances with just one line that made her chest tighten with something close to hope. "I am not looking for perfection, only partnership." The journey west took 5 days of rattling coaches and endless prairie views, each mile taking her further from everything she had known and closer to a future she could barely imagine. Willow pressed her forehead against the cool glass window and watched Nebraska unfold in shades of brown and gold, vast and empty in ways that made Boston's crowded streets seem like a different world entirely. The other passengers gave her sidelong glances when they thought she was not looking, their eyes catching on the raised pink tissue that covered her left cheek, jaw, and neck, before sliding away in discomfort or pity. She had grown accustomed to both reactions, had learned to hold her head high even when she wanted to disappear. When the train finally pulled into Kearney, Nebraska, the afternoon sun was slanting low across the platform, turning everything golden. Willow stepped down carefully, her traveling dress dusty and wrinkled, and searched the small crowd for a face she had never seen. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her bag, suddenly aware of how enormous this gamble truly was. She had left behind the only life she knew to marry a complete stranger based on a few brief letters, and a desperate need to escape the pitying looks and whispered conversations that had become her daily existence. "Miss Thornton." The voice came from her right, deep and uncertain, and she turned to find a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He held his hat in both hands, working the brim nervously as he studied her face with an intensity that made her want to turn away. She waited for the flinch, the momentary tightening around his eyes that always came when people first saw the damage the fire had done. It never came. Quinton Barnes simply looked at her, really looked, taking in her whole face rather than just the scars, and then he did something that made her breath catch. He smiled, genuine and warm, and stepped forward with his hand extended. "I am glad you came. The trip must have been hard." "It was long," Willow admitted, placing her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but gentle. "But I am here now. That you are." He seemed to realize he was still holding her hand and released it quickly, a flush creeping up his neck. "I have a wagon just over here. The ranch is about an hour outside town. I hope that is all right. I know it is more isolated than you are probably used to." "I grew up in a city where I knew hundreds of people by sight and not a single one cared whether I lived or died," Willow said quietly. "Isolation sounds peaceful." Something shifted in Quinton's expression, a softening that made him look younger despite the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. "I suppose we both have our reasons for seeking something different." He led her to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses, helped her up onto the seat with careful hands, and climbed up beside her. As they pulled away from the station, Willow snuck glances at her new husband, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the stranger she had agreed to marry. He was probably in his early 30s, lean and strong in the way of men who worked with their hands, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it rarely saw a smile. But his hands on the reins were steady and sure, and he had not looked at her scars with anything resembling disgust. "Your letters," Quinton said after they had been riding for several minutes in silence. "They were honest. I appreciated that. Most people put on airs when they are trying to make a match. I learned quickly that there was no point in hiding what cannot be hidden," Willow replied, touching her cheek again. "Men would respond to advertisements, agree to meet me, and then find excuses to leave the moment they saw my face. It seemed kinder to everyone involved to be upfront. Their loss." The words were simple, matter-of-fact, as though he was commenting on the weather rather than her deepest insecurity. "You wrote that you worked in a textile factory before the fire. Do you know anything about ranching?" "Nothing at all," Willow admitted, "but I learned quickly and I am not afraid of hard work. That is all I need." Quinton glanced at her, then back at the road. "I should tell you straight that life out here is not easy. The ranch is small, just me and a hired hand named Samuel who comes 3 days a week. The house is plain, the work is endless, and the winters are brutal. If you are expecting comfort or luxury, I cannot provide that. If I wanted comfort or luxury, I would have stayed in Boston and married one of the factory owners who like to collect damaged things to show off their charity," Willow said, more sharply than she intended. She took a breath and moderated her tone. "I want a purpose. I want to be useful. And I want to stop being looked at like I am something broken. You are not broken." Quinton said it so firmly, with such conviction, that Willow turned to stare at him. He met her eyes without flinching. "You survived something terrible. Those scars are proof that you are strong, not that you are damaged. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes, hot and sudden, and she blinked them back furiously. In 3 years, no one had said anything like that to her. People had been kind sometimes, in that distant, pitying way that made her feel like a charity case. But no one had suggested that her scars might be anything other than a tragedy to be politely ignored. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting her voice to say more. They rode in companionable silence after that, and Willow watched the landscape change from the orderly streets of Kearney to rolling prairie dotted with cattle and the occasional farmstead. The sky seemed impossibly vast after Boston's narrow alleys and crowded tenements, stretching from horizon to horizon in a brilliant blue dome that made her feel simultaneously insignificant and free. The air smelled different too, clean and sharp with grass and earth rather than coal smoke and human waste. The Barnes ranch appeared gradually, first as a dark smudge against the prairie, then resolving into a simple wooden house with a barn, a few outbuildings and corrals that held maybe 24 cattle. It was modest to the point of being spare, but everything looked well maintained and sturdy. Quinton pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, then came around to help Willow descend. "It is not much," he said, and for the first time she heard something like uncertainty in his voice. "But it is mine. Well, ours now, I suppose." "It is perfect," Willow said, and meant it. The house might be small and plain, but it represented something she had thought lost to her forever. A fresh start, a place where she might belong. Quinton showed her inside, ducking his head slightly to clear the door frame. The interior was dim after the bright afternoon sun, but as her eyes adjusted, Willow took in a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with a door leading to what must be the bedroom. Everything was scrupulously clean but utterly devoid of personal touches. No curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, no pictures on the walls. It looked like a place where someone existed rather than lived. "I am not much for decorating," Quinton said, following her gaze. "I figure you can make changes as you see fit. I want you to feel at home here." "I will earn my keep," Willow assured him. "I can cook, clean, mend. I will learn whatever else is needed." I am sure you will. Quinton set her bag down near the door to the bedroom. I should tell you, I had Samuel's wife make up the bedroom for you. I will sleep out here on a cot for now. I know we are married in law, but I figure you might want some time before. Well, there is no rush, is what I am saying. Willow studied him carefully. Most men in his position would consider her body part of the bargain, a right purchased along with her domestic labor. The fact that he was offering her time and space spoke to a consideration she had not expected. That is very kind of you. It is just decent. Quinton rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. I will go tend to the horses and check on the stock. Make yourself at home, look around. There is bread and cheese in the pantry if you are hungry, and the well is just outside the back door. I will be back before dark and we can have a proper supper. He left before she could respond, and Willow found herself alone in her new home. She walked slowly through the space, running her fingers over the rough wooden table, the simple shelves, the cast iron stove that would be her domain. The bedroom was small but adequate, with a real bed frame and a mattress that looked recently aired, a washstand, and a trunk for her clothes. Someone had put wildflowers in a jar on the washstand, a small touch of welcome that made her throat tight. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses on pegs and arranging her brush, mirror, and other personal items on the washstand. The mirror caught her reflection, and she studied herself honestly. The burns had healed as well as they ever would, leaving her left side marked with tight, shiny skin that pulled slightly at the corner of her mouth and eye. Her right side was untouched, still showing the face she had been born with, ordinary features, brown hair, gray eyes. Looking at herself was like seeing 2 different women, before and after, Beauty and Beast. Those scars are proof that you are strong, not that you are damaged. Quinton's words echoed in her mind, and she touched her face again, trying to see what he saw. It was difficult. She had spent 3 years watching people recoil, listening to whispers, seeing desire turn to disgust in men's eyes. But Quinton had looked at her whole face and smiled, had called other men fools for not seeing past the surface. Maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who could. She went back to the main room and began exploring in earnest. The pantry was better stocked than she had expected, with flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, and various preserved goods. Someone had clearly been preparing for her arrival. The stove was already laid with kindling, ready to light. She found cooking implements hanging from hooks, mismatched but functional. Willow decided to make dinner, partly because she was hungry but mostly because she needed something to do with her hands. She lit the stove, set beans to soak, and began making biscuits from the flour, falling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. It was something she had always been good at, one of the few skills her mother had passed down before dying of consumption when Willow was 15. That was when she had gone to work in the textile factory, spending her days in the deafening clatter of the looms until the day a lantern fell, and the whole place went up like kindling. She pushed the memories away and focused on the present, on the simple pleasure of creating something with her hands. By the time Quinton returned, the sun was setting, and the smell of baking biscuits filled the small house. "That smells amazing," he said from the doorway, surprise evident in his voice. "You did not have to go to all this trouble your first day." "It is no trouble. I like to cook." Willow pulled the biscuits from the oven and set them on the table beside the salt pork she had fried and the beans she had managed to make tender despite their late start. "It is simple fare, but it is hot." They sat across from each other at the wooden table and ate in silence for a few minutes. Quinton ate with the single-minded focus of a man who was genuinely hungry. But after he had taken the edge off his appetite, he looked up at her with something like wonder. This is the best meal I have had in years. I mostly just boil things until they are edible. Then my being here will improve your life in at least one respect, Willow said dryly. Already has. Quinton reached for another biscuit, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? You do not have to answer if you do not want. All right. In your first letter, you wrote that you wanted to leave Boston to escape the pity. But there must have been other options. Family, friends. Why come all the way out here to marry a stranger? Willow set down her fork carefully. My mother died when I was 15. My father drank himself to death 2 years later. I have no siblings, and the friends I had before the fire mostly drifted away after. People do not know how to act around tragedy. They either treat you like you might break at any moment, or they avoid you entirely so they do not have to feel uncomfortable. I was tired of being a burden or an embarrassment. You are neither of those things. You do not know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, Quinton acknowledged. But I know something about being alone. My parents died of cholera when I was 19. My brother took over the family ranch in Kansas and I came out here to start my own place. That was 12 years ago. I have built this ranch from nothing, worked myself to exhaustion trying to make it profitable. But at the end of the day, I come back to an empty house and eat boiled beans in silence. That is not much of a life. So you sent for a mail-order bride. So I sent for a partner, Quinton corrected gently. Someone to share the work and the rewards, someone to talk to, someone to care about who might care about me in return. The advertisement was Samuel's wife's idea. She said I was getting mean from being alone too long. Are you mean? I try not to be, but I have lost the habit of considering anyone but myself. I am probably going to make mistakes, say the wrong thing, forget to think about what you might need. If I do, I need you to tell me straight. I cannot fix what I do not know is broken. The same goes for you, Willow said. I have been taking care of only myself for a long time too. This will be an adjustment for both of us. They finished the meal and Willow began clearing the table, but Quinton stopped her with a gentle hand on her wrist. You cooked. I will clean. That is only fair. I do not mind. Neither do I. Go get some rest. You have been traveling for days. He was already gathering the dishes, his movements efficient despite his earlier claims of domestic incompetence. Tomorrow I will show you around properly, introduce you to the animals, explain how things work around here. But tonight, just rest. Willow wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her now that the adrenaline of arrival had faded. She nodded and retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She changed into her nightgown, washed her face and hands in the basin, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was more comfortable than she had expected, the blankets clean and warm. Through the door she could hear Quinton moving around, the quiet clink of dishes being washed and put away, the creak of floorboards as he prepared his own sleeping area. She had done it. She had actually married a stranger and moved halfway across the country on nothing but hope and desperation. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But as she drifted toward sleep, she found herself thinking about the way Quinton had looked at her without flinching, the way he had called her strong instead of damaged, the gentleness in his hands when he helped her down from the wagon. Maybe this would work. Maybe she had found someone who could see past the scars to the woman beneath. It was too soon to call it hope, but it was something close. Morning came early on a ranch. Willow woke to the sound of Quinton moving around the main room, trying and failing to be quiet. Pale light was just beginning to seep through the single bedroom window. She dressed quickly in her most practical dress, twisted her hair into a simple knot, and emerged to find Quinton bent over the stove with a distinctly harassed expression. I was trying to make coffee without waking you, he admitted. I am not having much success with either goal. Let me. Willow took over at the stove, finding the coffee beans and grinder, measuring water into the pot. Within minutes, she had a fire going and coffee brewing, the rich smell filling the small house. "What time do you usually start work?" "Sunup, more or less. But you do not need to keep ranchers' hours. I know you are still adjusting." "I would rather be useful than lie in bed worrying about whether I am being useful," Willow said honestly. "Tell me what needs doing and I will do it." Quinton poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Today I need to check the herd, make sure none of them wandered off or got into trouble overnight. Then there is fence that needs mending on the south pasture, and I want to move some of the cattle to fresh grazing. I was not planning to put you to work immediately. I want to learn. I cannot help if I do not know what needs doing." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, get something in your stomach first, then we will head out. Fair warning, it is going to involve a lot of walking and probably getting dirty. I have been dirty before. I will survive." They ate a quick breakfast of leftover biscuits and fried eggs. Then Quinton led her outside into the cool morning air. The sun was just cresting the horizon, turning the sky shades of pink and gold that took Willow's breath away. In Boston, she had rarely seen the sunrise, too exhausted from factory work to appreciate it on the rare occasions she was awake. Here, it felt like a gift. Quinton took her first to the barn, a sturdy structure that smelled of hay and animals. He introduced her to his 2 horses, a gentle mare named Daisy and a larger gelding called Buck. Daisy is the friendlier of the 2. If you are going to learn to ride, she is the one to learn on. "I have never been on a horse in my life," Willow admitted. "We will fix that. Out here, being able to ride is important. If something happens and you need to get to town or get help, I need to know you can manage it." He showed her how to approach the horses, where to pet them, how to read their body language. Willow was nervous but determined, reaching out to stroke Daisy's soft nose. The mare wafted warm breath across her palm and Willow smiled despite her nerves. They spent the morning checking the cattle, Quinton patiently explaining what he was looking for and why. The herd was small, maybe 30 head, but each animal represented significant investment and potential income. He pointed out which cows were pregnant, which calves were thriving, which animals needed to be watched for signs of illness. It was overwhelming but fascinating, a completely different world from anything Willow had known. By midday they were both sweaty and dusty, and Willow's feet ached in her inadequate city boots. But she had learned the boundaries of the ranch, met all the animals, and begun to understand the rhythm of the work. When they returned to the house for the midday meal, she felt tired but accomplished. "You did well," Quinton said as they ate cold chicken and bread. "I know it is a lot to take in all at once." "I am not afraid of learning," Willow said, "though I think I need better boots. We can go into town tomorrow, get you properly outfitted. You will need work dresses too, something that can take hard use, and a proper riding skirt." He paused. "I should have thought of that before you arrived. I am sorry." "You have thought of more than I expected," Willow assured him. "The flowers in the bedroom, the stocked pantry, preparing the bed. You have been more considerate than you give yourself credit for." Quinton looked down at his plate, a flush creeping up his neck. "I wanted you to feel welcome. I know this is not what you are used to. What I am used to is a boarding house room the size of your pantry, 12-hour days breathing lint and machine oil, and people who cannot meet my eyes. This is infinitely better." They worked together through the afternoon, and Willow began to see the shape of what her life here might be. There was always something that needed doing on a ranch: animals to tend, fences to mend, equipment to maintain, meals to prepare. It was exhausting, but it was also satisfying in a way factory work had never been. She could see the results of her labor immediately, could watch Quinton's expression shift from surprise to appreciation as she proved herself capable. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set, too tired for much conversation but comfortable in the silence. Willow studied Quinton's profile in the fading light, noting the way he had relaxed over the course of the day, the tension easing from his shoulders. He had been nervous too, she realized, worried about whether this arrangement would work, whether they would be able to build something together. "Can I ask you something?" Willow said eventually. "Of course. Why did you agree to marry me? After I told you about the scars, I mean." Most men would have looked for someone else. Quinton was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. "My brother's wife is beautiful. Perfect skin, perfect features, perfect manners. She is also cold as January ice and mean as a snake. She treats my brother like he is dirt on her shoe, spends his money like water, and complains constantly about ranch life. I watched him get more and more miserable year after year, trapped in a marriage with someone who only cared about appearances." He turned to look at Willow directly. "When you wrote and told me honestly about the fire and the scars, I figured anyone with that kind of courage would be worth knowing. And when you said you wanted a purpose and to be useful, I knew you understood what kind of life this would be. That mattered more to me than what you looked like. But you had not seen me yet. You did not know how bad it was. I had seen plenty bad in my time. War injuries, farming accidents, disease. Bodies are fragile things and life is hard. I was not looking for a porcelain doll to put on a shelf. I was looking for a partner who could handle reality. Well, you got one." Willow touched her scars self-consciously, "though I still find it hard to believe you were not even a little bit shocked when you saw me." "You want honesty?" Quinton shifted to face her more fully. "When I first saw you, my first thought was not about the scars. It was that you had the saddest eyes I had ever seen, and that you were trying very hard to look brave while expecting the worst. My second thought was that I wanted to make those eyes less sad. The scars were just part of your face. They do not define you." Willow felt tears welling up and blinked them back furiously. "You should not say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes me hope, and hope is dangerous." "Maybe," Quinton said quietly, "but maybe hope is the whole point. We are both here because we hoped for something better than what we had. We might as well see it through." They went to bed separately again that night, but something had shifted between them, a growing understanding that this arrangement might become something more than just practical partnership. Willow lay in the darkness and let herself imagine a future where she belonged somewhere, where someone looked at her and saw strength instead of damage. It was terrifying how much she wanted that. The next morning they rode into Kearney together, Quinton on Buck and Willow perched nervously on Daisy. The ride was bumpy and uncomfortable, and Willow was certain she would fall off at any moment, but Quinton rode beside her patiently, offering quiet encouragement and instruction. By the time they reached town, she was starting to get the hang of it, though her legs ached from gripping the saddle. Kearney was small but bustling, a frontier town that served as a supply point for the ranches and farms scattered across the surrounding prairie. Quinton tied the horses outside the general store and helped Willow dismount, his hands steady on her waist as she slid down. She was very aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his hands even through her dress. "We will get you everything you need," Quinton said, releasing her and stepping back. "Do not worry about the cost. I have been saving for this." The store was packed with goods from floor to ceiling: tools, fabric, canned goods, saddles, rifles, medicine. The proprietor, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes, looked up as they entered and his gaze snagged on Willow's scars before moving to Quinton. "Barnes, heard you went and got yourself married. News travels fast. This is my wife, Willow, "Willow, this is Harold Mason. He runs the best store in 3 counties." "Only store in 3 counties," Mason said, but he was smiling. He nodded to Willow with more politeness than she had expected. "Welcome to Kearney, Mrs. Barnes. What can I get for you folks today?" They spent the next hour selecting practical clothing, sturdy boots, work gloves, and various other supplies Quinton insisted she would need. Willow was uncomfortable with how much he was spending, but he waved off her protests. "You are going to be working as hard as any ranch hand. You need proper equipment. Besides, I told you I have been saving. The ranch does well enough." As they were finishing up, a woman entered the store with a basket over her arm. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and graying hair, and she broke into a smile when she saw Quinton. "There you are. Samuel told me your bride had arrived, but I have not had a chance to come by yet. Martha, this is my wife Willow. Willow, this is Martha Hayes. Her husband Samuel helps out on the ranch." Martha came forward and took both of Willow's hands in hers without any hesitation, looking directly into her face with warm approval. "It is so good to meet you. Quinton has needed someone for so long. You are very welcome here." "Thank you," Willow managed, taken aback by the genuine warmth in the greeting. "I hope you will come to church on Sunday. The whole community will want to meet you, and there is a social afterward. Nothing fancy, just people getting together." Martha squeezed her hands before releasing them. "I know it can be overwhelming to be the newcomer, but people here are good sorts mostly. They will make you welcome." Willow was not so sure about that, but she appreciated the kindness. They finished their shopping and loaded everything into saddlebags. Then Quinton surprised her by leading her to the town's small restaurant. "We are already here. We might as well have a proper meal instead of heading right back." The restaurant was simple but clean, and the food was surprisingly good. Over roast beef and potatoes, Quinton asked her about Boston, and Willow found herself talking more freely than she had in years. She told him about the crowded streets and the factory work, the constant noise and dirt, the way she had felt invisible even in the middle of crowds. He listened intently, asking questions, and gradually she relaxed enough to laugh at some of her own stories. "It sounds overwhelming," Quinton said. "All those people, all that noise. I do not think I could stand it." "You get used to anything if you have to," Willow said. "But I do not miss it. The quiet here is nice. I can hear myself think." "Wait until winter when you are snowed in for days at a time. You might change your mind about the quiet then, or I might love it even more." Willow met his eyes across the table. "I am not afraid of silence, Quinton. I am afraid of being alone while surrounded by people. There is a difference." Something shifted in his expression, a deepening understanding. "I know exactly what you mean." They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, both of them more comfortable in each other's presence than they had been just days before. Willow was sore from riding but determined not to show it, and she managed to dismount without assistance, earning an approving nod from Quinton. They worked together to untack the horses and get them settled, then carried their purchases into the house. That evening, as Willow prepared dinner, Quinton brought out a battered guitar from somewhere and began to play softly. The music was simple but sweet, filling the small house with something warm and alive. Willow found herself humming along as she worked, and when she glanced over at Quinton, he was smiling. "My mother taught me," he said. "I have not played much in recent years. No point when there is no one to hear it. It is beautiful. Please keep playing." So he did, and they fell into an easy rhythm. Willow cooking, Quinton playing, both of them settling into something that felt almost like home. When dinner was ready, they ate together, and afterward Quinton taught her a simple card game. They played until the light grew too dim to see the cards clearly, laughing over missed plays and friendly competition. When Willow finally retreated to the bedroom that night, she realized she was smiling. It had been a good day, perhaps the best she had had in years. And as she drifted off to sleep, she let herself acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding. She was starting to care for Quinton Barnes, this quiet rancher who looked at her scars and saw beauty. Sunday came, and with it the prospect of church and meeting the community. Willow dressed in her best dress, the one she had saved from before the fire, and twisted her hair into an elaborate knot that partially obscured the left side of her face. It was an old habit, trying to minimize the visibility of the scars, even though she knew it was futile. Quinton was waiting by the wagon, wearing clean clothes and looking distinctly uncomfortable. "I am not much for socializing," he admitted as he helped her up. "But Martha was right that people will want to meet you. Fair warning, there will be questions. Folks out here are friendly but nosy." "I can handle nosy," Willow said with more confidence than she felt. The church was a simple white building on the edge of town, and already a crowd was gathering when they arrived. Willow felt the weight of curious stares as Quinton helped her down from the wagon, saw the moment people noticed her scars and their expressions shifted. But Martha was there immediately, taking her arm and drawing her into a group of women with cheerful determination. "Ladies, this is Willow Barnes, Quinton's new wife. Willow, this is Sarah, Margaret, and Elizabeth. Sarah runs the boarding house, Margaret is married to the blacksmith, and Elizabeth teaches at the school." The women greeted her with varying degrees of warmth and curiosity. Sarah, a plump woman with a ready smile, immediately launched into a series of questions about where she was from and how she was settling in. Margaret was more reserved, studying Willow's scars with poorly concealed interest. But Elizabeth, a young woman perhaps Willow's own age, smiled with genuine friendliness. "It must be quite an adjustment coming from a city to ranch life," Elizabeth said. "If you ever need anything or just want company, I am only a few miles away. Teaching can be lonely work too." "Thank you. I would like that." The church service was simple and heartfelt, the minister a young man with more enthusiasm than polish. Willow found herself relaxing as the familiar rhythms of hymns and prayer washed over her. Quinton sat beside her, their shoulders occasionally brushing, and she was aware of his quiet presence in a way that made her feel anchored. After the service, people gathered outside for the promised social. Tables had been set up with food, and children ran wild while adults clustered in conversation groups. Willow was introduced to what felt like dozens of people, most of whom were polite if curious. A few stared at her scars openly, but no one said anything cruel. She began to relax, thinking perhaps this would not be as bad as she had feared. Then a woman in an expensive dress detached herself from a group and approached with the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes. She was beautiful in a sharp-edged way, with blonde hair and calculating blue eyes. "So you are the mail-order bride. How interesting. I am Caroline Foster. My father owns the largest ranch in the county." "Nice to meet you," Willow said carefully, sensing danger in the way a rabbit senses a fox. "I have to say, I am surprised Quinton went the mail-order route. There are plenty of available women right here in Nebraska, but I suppose when you are looking for cheap labor, it makes sense to cast a wide net." Caroline's eyes traveled over Willow's scars with unconcealed disdain. "And some women have fewer options than others, do they not? I imagine you were quite desperate to accept an offer from a failing ranch." "The ranch is not failing," Willow said evenly, refusing to be baited. "Not yet, perhaps, but everyone knows Quinton is barely holding on. One bad winter and he will lose everything." Caroline leaned in with false concern. "I hope he was at least honest with you about his financial situation. It would be terrible if you came all this way under false pretenses." Before Willow could respond, Quinton appeared at her side. His expression was harder than she had ever seen it, his voice cold. "Miss Foster, I see you are spreading your usual sunshine." "I was just welcoming your wife to the community," Caroline said sweetly, "by telling her lies about my ranch. That is generous of you." Quinton took Willow's arm gently. "If you will excuse us, my wife and I have other people to talk to. People who actually mean what they say." He steered Willow away, and she could feel the tension in his body. "I am sorry about that. Caroline has been a problem for years. Her father wants to buy my land, and she thinks being nasty will convince me to sell. She said you were barely holding on." "She is lying. The ranch is doing fine, not making me rich but profitable enough and growing every year. Foster wants the land because it has the best water access in the region, but I am not selling." He looked down at her with concern. "I should have warned you about her. Are you all right?" "I have dealt with worse than a spiteful rich woman," Willow assured him. But privately she was shaken. Caroline had identified and attacked her deepest insecurities with surgical precision. That she was desperate, that she had no options, that Quinton had only married her because he could not do better. They stayed at the social for another hour, talking with friendly neighbors and sampling the food, but Willow's earlier pleasure had been dampened. She kept replaying Caroline's words, kept wondering if there was truth buried in the malice. Was Quinton's ranch really struggling? Had he married her out of desperation rather than choice? On the ride home, Quinton was quiet, his jaw tight with residual anger. Finally he said, "Whatever Caroline said to you, do not let it burrow in and fester. She is a bully who gets her power from making other people doubt themselves. She said I was desperate and you married me because you needed cheap labor. And you think there is truth in that?" Quinton pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Willow, look at me. I married you because your letters showed me a woman of courage and honesty. I married you because I was tired of being alone and you seemed to understand what that felt like. I married you because I wanted a partner, not a servant. Yes, I need help on the ranch, but I could have hired a dozen hands for what I am investing in this marriage. If all I wanted was labor, there were cheaper options." "Then why me?" Willow whispered. "Be honest, Quinton. Why did you choose someone scarred and desperate instead of someone whole? Because whole is not what you think it is." Quinton reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and trace the edge of her scar with gentle fingers. "I am broken too, Willow, just in ways you cannot see. I have been angry and lonely and bitter for so long that I forgot what it felt like to hope for anything better. You reminded me. Your letters, your honesty, your refusal to pretend everything was fine when it clearly was not. That was real in a way nothing else in my life has been for years." Willow's breath caught as his fingers lingered on her face, warm and careful. "You really do not see them, do you? The scars?" "I see them. I just do not think they are the most important thing about you." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, his eyes intense. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see strength. I see someone who survived fire and kept going. I see someone who crossed half a country to start over rather than give up. I see someone brave enough to build a life with a stranger on nothing but faith and stubbornness. Those scars are part of that story. They make you who you are. How could I possibly see them as anything but beautiful?" The tears Willow had been holding back spilled over, hot tracks down her face. Quinton caught them with his thumb, his expression gentle, and without thinking Willow leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief and chaste, barely more than a press of lips, but it felt monumental. When she pulled back, Quinton was staring at her with wonder. "I have been wanting to do that for days, but I was afraid of pushing too hard." "I wanted you to," Willow admitted, "but I was afraid you were just being kind. I am not that kind." Quinton smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Can I kiss you properly now?" "Yes." This kiss was deeper, sweeter, full of promise and possibility. Quinton's hand cupped her face carefully, mindful of the sensitive scar tissue, and Willow let herself sink into the warmth of being wanted. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "We should get home," Quinton said roughly. "Before I forget, we are in the middle of a public road." They drove the rest of the way in charged silence, and when they reached the ranch, Quinton helped her down from the wagon with hands that lingered on her waist. Inside the house, they moved around each other carefully, both aware that something had shifted but uncertain how to proceed. Finally, as the sun was setting, Willow made a decision. She went to the bedroom, changed into her nightgown, and emerged to find Quinton banking the fire for the night. "Quinton," he looked up, and his eyes darkened when he saw what she was wearing. "Willow." "I do not want to sleep alone tonight," she crossed to him, heart pounding. "If that is all right with you, it is more than all right." Quinton stood and took her hands, lifting them to his lips. "But I want to be clear. I am not expecting anything beyond your presence. We can just sleep. There is no rush. I know, but I want to be close to you." Willow squeezed his hands. "I want to stop being afraid." They went to the bedroom together, and Quinton changed into his nightshirt while Willow turned away to give him privacy. When they climbed into the bed, there was a moment of awkwardness as they figured out how to arrange themselves. But then Quinton drew her against his chest, his arm solid and warm around her waist, and Willow felt something inside her relax completely. "This is nice," she whispered into the darkness. "It really is." Quinton's breath stirred her hair. "Sleep now. We have all the time in the world to figure out the rest." Willow drifted off, feeling safer than she had in years, anchored by the steady beat of Quinton's heart against her back. The days that followed took on a new sweetness as Willow and Quinton learned to navigate their growing attraction. They worked side by side during the day, and Quinton proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, how to mend fence, how to read the signs of weather and animal behavior. Willow discovered she liked ranch work, liked the physicality of it and the immediate visible results. She also liked watching Quinton work, the efficient economy of his movements, the quiet competence he brought to every task. At night, they would eat dinner together, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence. Quinton brought out his guitar more often, teaching Willow simple songs. And when they went to bed, they would lie together in the darkness, talking about everything and nothing until sleep claimed them. Kisses became more frequent, more heated, but Quinton never pushed for more than Willow was ready to give. 2 weeks after the social, Samuel Hayes came to work and brought Martha with him. She bustled into the house with a basket and announced she was there to help Willow with the kitchen garden. "Every ranch needs a good garden," she said firmly, "and 2 pairs of hands work faster than one." They spent the morning planning and preparing the garden plot, while Samuel and Quinton worked on repairing the barn roof. Martha proved to be excellent company, full of practical advice and funny stories about the various community members. She also, Willow noticed, seemed entirely unbothered by the scars. "I heard Caroline Foster cornered you at the social," Martha said as they worked. "Do not let that woman get under your skin." She has been after Quinton for years, mostly because he is one of the few men in the territory who will not kowtow to her father's money. The fact that he married you probably stung her pride. She made it sound like the ranch was failing. The ranch is doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. Quinton is one of the hardest workers I have ever seen, and he is smart about how he manages things. Foster wants the land because Quinton has water rights that would make Foster's own ranch more valuable. It is pure greed, nothing more. Martha paused in her digging to look at Willow seriously. That man adores you. I can see it every time he looks at you. Do not let other people's poison make you doubt that. How can you tell? Willow asked quietly. Because he smiles now. Real smiles, not that tight grimace he used to wear when he came to town. Because he talks about we instead of I. Because when Samuel mentioned you last week, Quinton's whole face lit up like sunrise. Martha reached over and squeezed her hand. Give yourself permission to be happy, dear. You have earned it. That night, after Samuel and Martha had left and the evening chores were done, Willow found herself thinking about Martha's words. She had been so focused on waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Quinton to reveal some hidden flaw or ulterior motive, that she had not let herself fully embrace what was growing between them. She found Quinton on the porch, watching the sunset. Without a word, she sat beside him and took his hand. He laced their fingers together, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. Martha thinks you adore me, Willow said. Martha is a perceptive woman. Do you adore me? Quinton turned to look at her, his expression serious. I am falling in love with you, Willow. I have been since about the third day you were here, when you insisted on learning to muck out the stalls and somehow made even that seem charming. I did not want to say anything because I did not want to pressure you. But yes, I adore you. Willow's heart felt too big for her chest. I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me. Why? Because I have never had anything I was afraid to lose before. And now I have this, have you, and the thought of something going wrong is paralyzing. Things might go wrong, Quinton said honestly. We might fight. We will definitely have hard times. Ranching is not an easy life, but I promise you I am not going anywhere. I am in this with you for the long haul, for better or worse. We already said those vows, Willow pointed out. We did. But I am saying them again now that we both know what they mean. Quinton stood and pulled her to her feet, took both her hands in his. I, Quinton Barnes, take you, Willow Thornton Barnes, to be my wife in truth as well as law. I promise to see you, all of you, for exactly who you are. I promise to value your strength and your scars because they are part of what makes you extraordinary. I promise to work beside you, laugh with you, hold you when you are sad, and love you every single day for the rest of my life. Willow was crying openly now, but she did not care. I, Willow Barnes, take you, Quinton Barnes, to be my husband in truth as well as law. I promise to trust you, to build a life with you, to stop waiting for disaster and start believing in happiness. I promise to work beside you, to learn your dreams and help make them real, and to love you with everything I have for as long as I live. Quinton pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that stole her breath. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want to make this marriage real in every way, but only when you are ready. I am ready now, Willow whispered. Take me to bed, husband. They came together that night with a sweetness that surprised Willow, who had expected awkwardness or pain. Instead, Quinton was infinitely patient and gentle, learning her body with reverent hands, showing her pleasure she had not known existed. And when they finally joined, it felt less like losing something and more like becoming whole. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, both of them too full of emotion for words. Quinton traced idle patterns on her shoulder, his touch making her shiver. Are you all right? I am better than all right. I am happy. Willow turned in his arms to look at him. Truly happy for the first time in longer than I can remember. Good, because I plan to keep you that way for the next 50 or 60 years. Is that all? Well, if we are both particularly stubborn, maybe 70. Willow laughed and kissed him again, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms, and fell asleep wrapped around each other as the prairie night settled over the ranch. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch flourished. Willow threw herself into the work with determination, learning everything Quinton could teach her. Her garden produced abundantly under Martha's tutelage, providing fresh vegetables for their table and extra to sell in town. She learned to ride well enough to help move cattle, to shoot well enough to protect the chickens from predators, to manage the household accounts and plan for the future. But more than the practical skills, she learned to be part of a partnership. She and Quinton developed a rhythm, an understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. They argued sometimes, usually about minor things like whether to invest in more cattle or improve the barn first, but they always worked through it with honesty and compromise. And every night, they came together with a passion that never seemed to fade, finding in each other a completeness that made the hard work worthwhile. The community gradually accepted Willow as one of their own. She became friends with Elizabeth the teacher, who turned out to share her love of reading and would lend her books. Martha became like a surrogate mother, full of advice and affection. Even some of the women who had been standoffish at first warmed up as they saw how hard Willow worked and how devoted she and Quinton were to each other. Caroline Foster remained a thorn in their side, spreading rumors and making snide comments whenever she encountered them in town. But Quinton and Willow learned to ignore her, secure in their own happiness. In late July, Willow realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before saying anything to Quinton, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was wrong. But when the nausea started in the mornings, she could no longer deny the truth. She told him one evening after dinner, simply and directly, "I think I am pregnant." Quinton went completely still, his eyes wide. "You think?" "I am fairly certain. All the signs are there." He crossed the room in 2 strides and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around with a whoop of joy that made her laugh. When he set her down, his hands went immediately to her still flat stomach, his expression one of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "We are." Willow covered his hands with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it." Quinton kissed her thoroughly. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. We are going to be parents." "I do not know anything about being a mother," Willow admitted. "My own mother died when I was so young, and I never thought I would have the chance. We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." Quinton pulled her close, his hand protective over her belly. "Our child is going to be so loved, so wanted." "We will make sure of that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Willow continued to work as much as she could, though Quinton became increasingly protective, insisting she avoid heavy lifting and take frequent rests. Martha was delighted by the news and immediately began planning, arriving one day with a cradle that had been in her family for generations. "Samuel and I were never blessed with children," she said, her eyes a little misty. "I want you to have this. Every baby deserves to be rocked in a cradle made with love." As winter approached, Quinton made sure they were well stocked with supplies, unwilling to risk being caught unprepared with Willow pregnant. The first snow came in November, blanketing the prairie in white silence. Willow loved the enforced quiet, the way it felt like they were the only 2 people in the world, safe and warm in their small house while the wind howled outside. She grew rounder as the baby developed, and Quinton seemed fascinated by the changes in her body. He would rest his hand on her belly for hours, talking to their unborn child, telling stories about the ranch and the life they would build together. When the baby first kicked, strong enough for him to feel it, he actually had tears in his eyes. "That is our child," he said in wonder. "Our baby, already so strong." December brought heavier snows, and they were indeed snowed in for days at a time, but Willow did not mind. They would spend the long evenings reading aloud to each other, playing cards, making plans for the future. Quinton continued to play his guitar, and Willow found herself singing along more often, her voice growing stronger with practice and confidence. On Christmas Eve, Quinton presented her with a gift he had been secretly working on for months, a beautifully carved wooden box with her initials on the lid. Inside, nestled in fabric, were a dozen small wooden animals, exquisitely detailed. "For the baby," he explained. "So our child will know their father can make things with his hands, not just work until he drops." Willow gave him a shirt she had sewn, her stitches much improved from her first attempts, and a book of poetry she had ordered from Boston. They exchanged gifts by firelight, kissed under a sprig of pine, and made love slowly and carefully, mindful of her swollen belly. "I love you," Willow whispered into the darkness afterward. "I love the life we have built. I love who I am when I am with you." "I love you too," Quinton replied, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. "You and this baby are my whole world. I never knew I could be this happy." January and February passed in a blur of cold and preparation. Martha came to visit whenever the weather allowed, teaching Willow what to expect during childbirth and what supplies they would need. Quinton arranged for the doctor from Kearney to be on call, though getting to town in winter would be challenging if the baby came during a storm. In early March, as the first hints of spring began to show, Willow woke in the middle of the night with cramping pains. She tried to ignore them, thinking it was false labor, but they grew stronger and more regular. Finally, she shook Quinton awake. "I think it is time." Quinton was up immediately, lighting lamps and building up the fire. The pains were coming faster than Willow had expected, and it quickly became clear there would be no time to fetch the doctor. Quinton sent Samuel, who had been sleeping in the barn due to an early morning task, racing toward town, but both of them knew he would not be back in time. "I can do this," Quinton said, though his face was pale. Martha explained everything. "I can help you through this." The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the rest of the night and into the morning. Willow had never experienced pain like this, waves of agony that made her cry out despite her determination to be brave. But Quinton was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, encouraging her when she was certain she could not continue. "You are the strongest person I know," he told her as dawn broke. "You survived fire and built a new life from ashes. You can do this. Our baby is almost here." And finally, as the sun climbed higher with one last enormous effort, Willow felt the baby slip free. Quinton caught their child with shaking hands, and a moment later a robust cry filled the small house. "It is a boy," Quinton said, his voice thick with tears. "We have a son, Willow, a perfect, beautiful son." He cleaned the baby quickly and placed him on Willow's chest. She looked down at the tiny red-faced infant and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect." "He looks like you," Quinton said, stroking the baby's fine dark hair. "Same stubborn chin." They were still marveling over their new son when Samuel returned with the doctor an hour later. The doctor checked both Willow and the baby and pronounced them healthy, if a bit dramatic in their timing. "Most first babies take longer," he said. "This one was in a hurry to meet the world." "He takes after his mother that way," Quinton said, smiling at Willow. "Never one to waste time." They named him Thomas, after Willow's father, and he was a vocal, demanding baby who kept them both exhausted and enchanted. Willow healed quickly, and soon they settled into the rhythm of new parenthood. Interrupted sleep, endless diaper changes, the sweet weight of a nursing baby in her arms. Quinton was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, singing him the songs his own mother had sung, staring at his small face with unconcealed adoration. "I never thought I would have this," he confessed one night as they lay in bed with Thomas sleeping peacefully between them. "A family, a real family. It seemed like something other people got, not me." "I felt the same way," Willow admitted. "After the fire, I thought my life was essentially over. That I would spend whatever years I had left alone and pitied. And now look at us." "Now look at us," Quinton echoed, reaching across their sleeping son to take her hand. "A family." Spring arrived in full force, bringing new calves and endless work, but it also brought growth and prosperity. The ranch continued to expand, and Quinton hired another hand to help with the increased workload. Willow balanced caring for Thomas with her own work, often strapping the baby to her back as she tended the garden or the chickens. It was exhausting but deeply satisfying. Thomas thrived, growing from a tiny infant into a chubby baby with his mother's gray eyes and his father's smile. He was curious and active, always reaching for new things, always babbling and laughing. Watching him discover the world made Willow see everything fresh again, made her appreciate the beauty in simple things. On their first anniversary, Quinton took Willow into town and bought her a silver locket. Inside, he had placed a tiny photograph of the three of them, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through the previous month. "So you can always keep us close to your heart," he said as he fastened it around her neck. Willow touched the locket, feeling the weight of it settle against her chest. "I do not need a reminder. You are both imprinted on my soul." "I know, but I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that shows the world how much I value you." They danced that evening in their small house, Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle, moving slowly to music only they could hear. Willow rested her head on Quinton's shoulder and thought about the terrified woman who had stepped off the train a year ago, certain she was headed for disappointment at best and disaster at worst. That woman seemed like a stranger now. "What are you thinking?" Quinton asked, his arms tightening around her waist. "That I am grateful for all of this, for you seeing past my scars to the woman underneath, for giving me a chance when no one else would." Quinton stopped dancing and cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs tracing the edges of her scars with infinite tenderness. "I did not see past your scars. I saw them, and I saw the courage it took to survive what you survived. I saw strength and resilience and beauty. Those scars are part of you, part of your story. They make you who you are. How could I possibly want you to be anyone else?" Willow kissed him deeply, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude into the contact. When they broke apart, she was crying, but they were happy tears. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I know the feeling." Quinton wiped her tears away gently. "But we do not have to be scared anymore. We have built something real here, something strong. Whatever comes, we will face it together." The years passed with the kind of fullness that makes time seem to accelerate. Thomas grew into a lively toddler, then a curious child, always underfoot and asking questions. The ranch continued to prosper, and they were able to expand the house, adding a proper bedroom for Thomas and a larger kitchen for Willow. They added more cattle, more land, building security and comfort. When Thomas was 3, Willow became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed easier despite the challenges of caring for an active toddler. Quinton was just as protective and attentive as he had been the first time, maybe more so. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived on a mild autumn evening with much less drama than her brother. She was small and delicate, with Quinton's dark hair and Willow's stubborn determination. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help care for her. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named Samuel after their good friend. And 3 years after that, twin girls completed their family. The house was full of noise and laughter and chaos, and Willow had never been happier. The community had long since accepted her completely. She was known as a hard worker, a devoted mother, and a woman who could be counted on in times of trouble. Her friendship with Martha remained strong, and she had developed close bonds with several other women in the area. Even Caroline Foster eventually gave up her antagonism, marrying a banker from Kansas and moving away. Quinton continued to be the steady center of Willow's world. They still made time for each other despite the demands of 5 children and a thriving ranch, still found moments to steal kisses in the barn or dance together after the children were asleep. The passion between them had matured but never faded, deepening into something richer and more complex than the initial rush of falling in love. On their 10th anniversary, they took a rare day for themselves, leaving the children with Martha and Samuel, and rode out to a spot on the ranch that had always been special to them. It was a small rise that overlooked the entire property, where you could see for miles in every direction. They sat together on a blanket, watching the clouds move across the enormous sky, and Willow marveled at how much her life had changed. "Do you remember the day I arrived?" she asked. "Every detail," Quinton replied. "You were so scared but trying so hard to be brave. And I was terrified I would disappoint you. You have never disappointed me, not once in 10 years. That cannot possibly be true. I am sure I have made plenty of mistakes." "Well, none that mattered." Willow smiled and touched her scars, a gesture that had become unconscious over the years. "Do you remember what you said to me at the train station? When you first saw these, I said I was glad you came. You looked at me like I was whole, like the scars did not define me. I had spent 3 years having people look through me or around me, but never really at me. You were the first person to see me, truly see me, since the fire." Quinton took her hand and brought it to his lips. "I told you then that those scars proved you were strong. I meant it. They still make you beautiful, Willow. They are part of your story, part of what makes you extraordinary." "You have given me so much," Willow said, her voice thick with emotion. "A home, a family, a purpose. But most importantly, you gave me back myself. You taught me that I was worth loving, scars and all." "You taught me the same thing," Quinton replied. "I was broken too, just in different ways. Lonely and bitter, and convinced I would never have anything more than work and empty evenings. You showed me what it meant to truly share a life with someone. You made me whole." They made love there on the blanket under the vast Nebraska sky, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice and deep knowing. And afterward, they lay tangled together, talking about their children and their plans for the future, content in the life they had built together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Willow thought about the scared woman who had stepped off the train 10 years ago. She had been so certain that her scars made her unlovable, that the best she could hope for was to be useful to someone who would tolerate her presence. She had never imagined she might find true love, might build a family, might discover that beauty had nothing to do with an unmarked face and everything to do with courage and resilience and the willingness to keep trying. "Thank you," she whispered to Quinton. "For what?" "For seeing me. For loving me. For making all of this possible. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who did not know how to express what he needed," Quinton replied. "Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for 5 incredible children and 1,000 wonderful memories. Thank you for being exactly who you are." They rode back to the house as the stars began to appear, ready to return to their noisy, chaotic, beautiful life. The children would be waiting, full of stories about their day with Martha and Samuel. There would be dinner to make and baths to give and bedtime stories to read. There would be morning chores and endless work and all the challenges that came with ranching and raising a large family. But there would also be love, deep and true and lasting. There would be partnership and laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful together. There would be nights in each other's arms and lazy Sunday mornings and stolen kisses in the barn. There would be watching their children grow and thrive, seeing parts of themselves reflected in the next generation. Willow looked at Quinton riding beside her, this man who had seen her scars and called her beautiful, who had taken her broken pieces and helped her forge them into something stronger than she had been before. She thought about the mail-order bride who had arrived expecting rejection and found acceptance instead. She thought about the lonely cowboy who had been brave enough to reach out for connection, and she smiled, knowing that their story was far from over. There would be more years ahead, more challenges and triumphs, more moments of joy and struggle. But they would face all of it together, these two scarred souls who had found healing in each other's love. The ranch that had seemed so vast and empty when she first arrived was now full to bursting with life and love. The house that had been sparse and joyless was now a home in every sense of the word. And the woman who had thought herself unworthy of love had discovered that she had been wrong, that she was not just worthy but cherished, not just accepted but adored. As they approached the house, they could see lights in the windows and hear the distant sound of children's laughter. Martha would have fed them dinner already, but they would want their parents to tuck them in. Thomas would insist on one more story. Rose would want her hair braided. Samuel would want to talk about the foal that was expected any day. The twins would compete for attention, each wanting to be the last one kissed goodnight. It was ordinary and it was magical, this life they had created together. And as Willow dismounted and Quinton came around to take her hand, as they walked toward their home together, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The mail-order bride with the scars had found her place in the world. And the lonely cowboy who had looked past those scars to see the woman beneath had found his heart's home. Together, they had built something neither of them could have created alone, a love story written across the Nebraska prairie, as vast and enduring as the land itself. Years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. The children grew and the land prospered, and through it all, Quinton and Willow remained at the center, their love the foundation everything else was built upon. They grew older together, their faces marked by sun and time and laughter, and Willow's scars faded from bright pink to pale silver, just another part of the landscape of her life. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party. Thomas was 24 now, married himself and helping run the ranch. Rose was 21, engaged to the doctor's son. Samuel was 19 and talking about studying law. The twins were 16, both fiercely independent and already making plans for their futures. As Willow looked around at the gathered family and friends, at the life that had grown from that single brave decision to step onto a train and head west, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Martha and Samuel Hayes were there, elderly now but still sharp and affectionate. Elizabeth the teacher had become a lifelong friend. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the region, a testament to hard work and careful stewardship. But more than the material success, more than the beautiful children and the comfortable home, Willow treasured the love that had sustained her through it all. Quinton was gray-haired now, his face deeply lined, his hands marked by decades of hard work. But when he looked at her, she still saw the same warmth and admiration that had been there that first day at the train station. "What are you thinking?" he asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Willow said, leaning back against his chest. "That every scar, every hardship, every moment of fear was worth it because it led me here to you, to this." "The scars still make you beautiful," Quinton murmured into her hair. "More beautiful now than ever, because I know every story behind every mark, every moment that shaped you into the incredible woman you are." Willow turned in his arms and kissed him, not caring that their children were watching and probably rolling their eyes at their parents' public affection. After 25 years, some things never changed. The spark between them still burned bright. The connection still ran deep. That night, after all the guests had left and the children had gone to their own homes or beds, Quinton and Willow sat on their porch and watched the stars. It was the same sky that had watched over them that first night, vast and eternal, and they were the same two people underneath. A woman with scars who had learned she was beautiful, and a man who had always seen past the surface to the truth beneath. "I love you," Willow said simply. "I love you too," Quinton replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that, until the end of time." And under the Nebraska stars, on the ranch they had built together, the mail-order bride and the lonely cowboy held each other close, grateful for every moment of their extraordinary, ordinary, beautiful life together. Their story had started with fear and uncertainty, with a brave gamble and a kind heart. But it had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that weathered every storm, a partnership that strengthened with every challenge, a family that filled every empty space. The scars that Willow had once seen as her greatest curse had become, through Quinton's eyes, a symbol of her greatest strength. And in learning to see herself as he saw her, she had discovered that beauty was never about perfection. It was about courage and resilience, about surviving and thriving, about opening your heart even when you were afraid. As they finally went inside to their bed, their home, their life together, Willow touched her scars one last time, but now with affection rather than shame. They were part of her story, the story of a woman who had risen from the ashes and found love in the most unexpected place. And that, she thought as Quinton pulled her close, was the most beautiful story of all. Their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect. It was something better, a real life, fully lived, with all its joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. It was waking up every morning next to someone who truly saw you and loved what they saw. It was building something meaningful together, one day at a time. It was the quiet satisfaction of looking back on decades of shared life, and knowing you would not change a single moment. The mail-order bride had arrived with scars, and the lonely cowboy had said those scars made her beautiful. In doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the freedom to be fully herself, marked but not broken, scarred but not damaged, imperfect but completely, utterly loved. And together, they had created a legacy of love that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of seeing past the surface to the extraordinary beauty that lies beneath.